The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken and KFC. With the news at 6, I'm Dennis Chabrol. Good evening. First, the highlights. City Council workers are getting a 10% pay hike. The People's National Congress reforms concerns about the management of the coronavirus pandemic have been dismissed. Regionally, the payment of severance to ex-Liat pilots and other workers is tied up in Barbados' upcoming general election. Internationally, prosecutors in Mexico have recommended that a former head of the state oil company face trial for corruption. The details of these and other stories in a moment.
Hate to stand in lines? Don't worry. KFC has got you covered with their drive-thrus, which are open now from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. at Movietown, Vlissingen Road, Mandela Avenue, Reading Hoop, Parika, and the Amazonia Mall. That's right, you can drive through at 6 of their 9 locations. Remember, their current opening hours are 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Go on down and let your taste buds savor the spices today. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now the news in detail. The more than 600 workers of the Georgetown City Council will get a 10% increase in wages and salaries. City Mayor Obrach Narayan says 5% will be retroactive to January 1, 2021, and there will be an additional 5% from January 2022. He says the council is relying on raking in millions of dollars in outstanding rates and taxes to pay the salary increases. The mayor shies away from saying whether rates and taxes will be increased for the long-term payment of the salary increases.
Well, that is a council has to deliberate on such matter. We'll wait on the council. The finance committee has to advise us on the way forward on those things.
He says that City Council workers had not received salary increases since 2018. ExxonMobil today says it made 2 oil discoveries at Fangtooth 1 and Law 1 in the Stabroek Block offshore Guyana. The Fangtooth 1 well encountered approximately 164 feet of high-quality oil-bearing sandstone reservoirs. The well was drilled in 6,030 feet of water and is located approximately 11 miles northwest of the Liza field. The Law 1 well encountered approximately 315 feet of high-quality hydrocarbon-bearing sandstone reservoirs. The well was drilled in 4,793 feet of water and is located approximately 42 miles southeast of the Liza field. President of ExxonMobil Guyana, Alistair Routledge, says that the discoveries are a testimony to ExxonMobil's technology and experience.
We've been exploring offshore Guyana. To achieve that amount is quite outstanding. We tend to forget this is still a frontier exploration region. So the success rate we're having really talks to the technology that we're able to bring, the experience from similar basins around the world. This is not normal, this level of success, and we remain committed to our exploration activities offshore Guyana and hope to continue to extend and grow that resource base.
ExxonMobil says these discoveries will add to the previously announced recoverable resource estimate for the block of 10 billion oil equivalent barrels. Meanwhile, President Irfaan Ali is welcoming these 2 latest oil discoveries.
I'm very happy with every additional find that Guyana make because it adds to our total base and it adds to our ability in advancing the prosperity of our population and also improving our prospect of securing a prosperous future, even for future generation of Guyanese.
President Irfaan Ali. President Irfaan Ali says government is exploring the possibility of facilitating home testing for COVID-19 as Guyanese continue to flock testing sites. The president was earlier today speaking at the press conference. Within the past 24 hours, 785 persons have tested for the virus, making it the highest number per day since the pandemic began in 2019. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony is appealing to Guyanese not to rush to testing sites because they believe that they have been in contact with someone who has COVID. The opposition People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, is raising a range of concerns, including a lack of information about the variants of the coronavirus COVID-19 in Guyana. However, Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says all the available evidence points to the presence of the highly contagious Omicron variant.
With Omicron, one of the PCR tests that is normally done, it targets three specific areas of the virus, and one of the areas is called an S gene. And if you see an S gene drop off, it is a proxy indicator that it might be Omicron. You'll have, of course, to be sure, you have to confirm that with genetic sequencing, which we are also pursuing. But in the light of the epidemiological evidence and what we have seen with the S gene drop off, we are pretty sure that we have Omicron here. So that's not, I don't think that there's much debate there.
President Jerfinali also dismissed concerns by the PNCR that a number of the testing sites have been shut down. He says there are sufficient kits. The PNCR berated the government for a lack of information about the pandemic in Guyana, including epidemiological data to confirm the variants in the country. But the health minister says the Delta variant was still dominant. But from the look of things, the Omicron variant will eventually be the most prevalent here, even as Guyana awaits gene sequencing results due in 2 weeks to confirm which variant is here. Dr. Anthony says that local, regional, and international evidence is pointing to strong indicators that the Omicron variant is in Guyana.
In terms of the PNC saying that we don't have data to manage this epidemic, that's not true. Every single day, we have a team of persons that meet. This include each one of the regional health officers and all the respective heads, whether of hospitals and persons dealing with testing, all the key players that are helping with the management of this disease. They meet every morning at 7:30. They go through all the data relating to COVID. And based on the information that we are getting, they strategize for the rest of the day and going into the near future. So we are very sure with what we are doing, and it's data-driven and it's science-driven.
Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony. A 75-year-old man was early this morning burnt to death in his home on Pilot Street, New Amsterdam. The Guyana Fire Service says Oscar Liddell lost his life and the entire building and its contents were destroyed. The blaze occurred shortly after 6:30 this morning. The two-story wooden and concrete building was owned by John Liddell and was occupied by the now dead man. The Guyana Fire Service says the cause of the fire is believed to have been a lighted gas stove left unattended, which flared up and ignited nearby combustible materials. A man is in custody for allegedly attempting to murder his reputed wife by lashing her head several times with a piece of wood. Police say 31-year-old Simone Edwards has since been admitted to the Linden Hospital complex in a critical condition as her skull is fractured. The incident occurred at about 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon at Block 22 Worcester, Linden. Edwards' 14-year-old son told the police that after hearing screams, he looked out and saw the man standing over his mother and lashing at the back of her head with a piece of wood. The boy reportedly says that when he returned with a cutlass, the man threw a longer wood at him and fled. Investigators say the couple has had a history of domestic disputes over the past 6 years that they have been together. The woman's uncle and a nephew were alerted and they went behind the suspect along with other public-spirited persons. According to the police force, he was caught and assaulted before being handed over to law enforcement agents. He has been admitted to a hospital and is under police guard. Turning to news now from the Caribbean, the Leeward Islands Pilots Association, LIALPA, is again lamenting the failure by shareholder governments to pay them their severance. LIALPA wants Barbados to summon a meeting among shareholder governments to pay severance to the terminated employees. Chairman of LIALPA, Patterson Thompson, says his union continues to wait on the Barbados government to send letters to discuss the plight of the workers who have been in the breadline for the past 21 months. More from Barbados Today's Emmanuel Joseph.
Thompson acknowledged that general elections slated for January the 19th in Barbados will now further delay any chances of talks being held to conclude a plan to pay the struggling ex-LIAT employees their legal entitlements.
But we are still struggling. All the LIAT workers are 21 months into having no severance at all, no end in sight to the plight. And it's a very difficult time to live. We are struggling. We have no money to retool. We have no money to pay bills. There is no job on the horizon for us. So we are 3 times over worse than most people.
Thompson said the offer of a compassionate payment of half of the severance made by the Antigua government and the advance of $2,000 per month by the Barbados government to its nationals have not gone far enough to satisfy the dire financial problems of the workers.
The 2 initiatives from the Barbados government and Antigua government do not deal with it conclusively. They do not deal with the situation long term. And we need help. Not only do we need help, we also would like to know what about the future of aviation in the Caribbean. What about, see other airlines operating within Barbados airspace now, within Barbados, home port in Barbados. That's fantastic, it's good for them. But what about the Barbadians and the other CARICOM nationals who lived in Barbados, who work for that? What about their future? Has there anything been discussed with other airlines to try and absorb some of us into that workforce? Can that happen? I understand they would have their people, but obviously everything is a negotiation.
Hundreds of former LIAT employees are owed about 80 million EC dollars, that's 30 million US dollars in severance payments. Emmanuel Joseph for Barbados Today.
Trinidad and Tobago is preparing to purchase pediatric versions of the Pfizer vaccine. TT&T News Online also reports that there are more pediatric COVID cases.
The Ministry of Health has already placed an order for the pediatric version of the Pfizer vaccine and will get supplies once it is approved for use by the WHO. Health Minister Terence Dial Singh said if approved, the pediatric version would be different to the current stock of Pfizer that is in this country.
Have to wait for the EUL or EUA approval for the pediatric version, where the dose is different, the buffer is different, the packaging is different. What I can tell you and tell the country is that we have not been standing still on this issue. We have already placed orders for the pediatric version.
Meanwhile, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Roshan Parasram said there has been a slight uptick in pediatric cases at hospital and they will continue to monitor those numbers.
What we have noticed over the last few days, we actually have 8 pediatric cases in hospital today. One of them is critically ill in ICU. So we note it as a concern on the back of Omicron and looking on as what is happening in the rest of the world. The pediatric cases are filling up the hospitals in the US, for example.
Trinidad and Tobago's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Roshan Parasram, ending that report from TTT News Online. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was discharged from hospital on Wednesday, 2 days after being admitted with an intestinal obstruction. This is his latest health complication from a 2018 stabbing. Bolsonaro's Dr. Antonio Macedo told reporters the president is recovered and ready to work. He adds that the Brazilian leader will be on a special diet during the weekend and will not be able to perform vigorous physical activities. Bolsonaro, who has been in power since 2019 and plans to stand for a re-election in a presidential vote scheduled for October, said he'll maintain his regular agenda, including a trip to Russia in February. He was vacationing in the southern Brazilian state of Santa Catarina when he was urgently taken to São Paulo's Vila Nova Star Hospital hospital in the early hours of Monday after suffering from abdominal pain. Doctors inserted a nasogastric tube and even considered surgery, but the obstruction was cleared on Tuesday. A medical bulletin issued on Tuesday evening said that the president's digestive tract was showing signs of recovery, that he was doing well on a liquid diet, and that doctors had removed the nasogastric tube. Bolsonaro has undergone a series of emergency surgeries since being knifed during a campaign event in September 2018. The British Virgin Islands Airport Authority has announced that the operating hours at the Terence B. Lettsome International Airport have been cut for the coming weeks. This change takes effect on Wednesday, January 5, and is in response to a wave of COVID-19 related illnesses that has afflicted the airport staff. The British Virgin Islands Airports Authority says daily operational hours at the airport will now be from 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. until further notice. The airport will operate on a prior permission required basis through to Tuesday, January 11. During this time, the airport will close for 2 half-hour periods from 9 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And now we go to the BBC World Service for the latest bulletin of international news. Over now to the BBC World Service in London.
With Sue Montgomery. The president of Kazakhstan has appealed for help from a Russian-led regional military alliance to quell nationwide protests. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev described the protesters as terrorists, who he said had been trained abroad. 8 police and National Guard troops have been killed. Paul Adams has the latest.
Across thousands of miles and 2 time zones, events appear to be moving fast. In Kazakhstan's largest city, Almaty, protesters stormed the mayor's office and airport and seized other key buildings, including a presidential residence. Clashes with security forces continued into the night. The protest began at the weekend following the government's decision to remove a price cap on liquefied natural gas, which most people use to power their cars. It led to a huge spike in prices. But with each passing day, the protests seem to tap into other long-standing grievances.
The White House has appealed for calm and restraint in Kazakhstan. President Biden's spokeswoman Jen Psaki described as false an accusation from Russia that the U.S. had instigated the protests.
We're monitoring reports of protests in Kazakhstan. We support calls for calm, for protesters to express themselves peacefully, and for authorities to exercise restraint. There are some crazy Russian claims about the U.S. being behind this, so let me just use this opportunity to convey that as absolutely false and clearly a part of the standard Russian disinformation playbook we've seen a lot of in past years.
The U.S. Attorney General has promised to hold accountable all those involved in the deadly attack in the Congress in Washington a year ago. 5 people died after thousands of outgoing President Donald Trump supporters stormed the Capitol building. Speaking on the eve of the first anniversary of the January the 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, said there could not be different rules for the powerful and the powerless.
The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy. We will follow the facts wherever they lead.
Earlier, the police chief responsible for the U.S. Capitol building told a Senate hearing security there was much tighter now. The world #1 men's tennis player Novak Djokovic has been forced to remain at an Australian airport as a row escalates over his COVID vaccination exemption for the Australian Open. The state government in Victoria says it will not support his visa application. The president of the player's native Serbia, Alexander Vucic, called for an end to what he described as the harassment of Djokovic. World news from the BBC. France has reported 1/3 new cases of COVID-19, its highest ever figure for a single day. The country also registered 246 deaths linked to coronavirus. The Netherlands and Sweden have also registered their highest daily COVID figures. In Italy, the cabinet has decided to introduce mandatory vaccinations for all those over the age of 50. Morocco and China have signed an agreement aimed at greatly increasing cooperation under Beijing's Joint Belt and Road Initiative. Under the agreement, which was sealed via video conference, Chinese companies will be encouraged to step up investment in Moroccan projects in technology and agriculture. Prosecutors in Mexico have recommended that the former head of the state oil company, Emilio Lozoya, be charged and sentenced to 39 years in prison for corruption. Mr. Lozoya was extradited from Spain in 2020 after several years on the run. Here's our Americas editor, Leonardo Rocha.
Mr. Lozoya made a deal with the prosecution and promised to reveal the names of politicians and businessmen involved in a major corruption scheme at Mexico's state oil company Pemex. Despite the agreement, the prosecutor's office has asked for a lengthy prison sentence. Mr. Lozoya has been accused of taking millions of dollars in bribes from the Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht. Prosecutors say the money was used not only for personal enrichment, but to finance the election campaign of the former president, Enrique Peña Nieto, who denies any wrongdoing.
Organisers of the prestigious Grammy Music Awards have postponed this year's annual show in Los Angeles because of the renewed spread of the coronavirus in the United States. The Recording Academy and CBS Television said holding the show on the scheduled date of January the 31st would pose too many risks. BBC News.
That's the news to the moment.
KFC delivery is now available from the Amazonia location for shore-based Little Diamond residents. Call 632-0533, 632-0533, 6080-162, 6080-162, or 503-3591, 503-3591. That's KFC's delivery service from the Amazonia location. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
Now to end the news, a recap of the highlights. City Council workers in Georgetown are getting a 10% pay hike. The People's National Congress reforms concerns about the management of the coronavirus pandemic have been dismissed. Regionally, the payment of severance to ex-Liatem pilots and other workers is tied up in Barbados' upcoming general election. And internationally, prosecutors in Mexico have recommended that a former head of the state oil company face trial for corruption. That's the end of the news. It came to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.